Hi, everyone, and on behalf of OTSCA, we hope you're staying safe and well. I'm Katie Danini, and at OTSCA, I serve as a Director of Patient Advocacy and Stakeholder Management. I'm happy to be with you here today to have a discussion with three guests who can share their thoughts on mental health and chronic disease. As we all know, COVID has created an incredible amount of uncertainty and has forced many of us into isolation. For those of us with chronic conditions, the uncertainty is even greater. Chronic conditions are hard to manage even in the best of times. And now with everything that's going on, getting care creates even more stress and risk. According to the CDC, 60% of adults are now living with chronic conditions. And as we learn more about the novel coronavirus, we're beginning to understand how risky it is for people with chronic conditions. It's easy to have feelings of fear and confusion during the pandemic. Our goal today is to share some ideas and some resources on how to cope and to help combat that fear and confusion. We hope it brings you peace. We hope it brings you some tools. So with that, let's dive into our discussion. Today, we're going to focus on three areas. The first is what's changing under COVID. For people with chronic conditions, what about their care is different? And what are people doing to ensure that their care doesn't get interrupted? Second, how can people with chronic conditions care for themselves? How can they maintain their own mental health or that of friends and family? And the third is talking about what tools and resources are available for people. If you or someone you love is seeking some support, where do you turn? How do you find that information? Finally, I want to share that today's discussion is a part of a series that we at OTSCA are filming on mental health and resiliency. I invite you to visit those videos online. And with that, let's get started with today's discussion. Let's meet our speakers. First is Valen Keefer. Valen is a public speaker, writer, fundraiser, and patient advocate for polycystic kidney disease and organ donation. She's lived with chronic illness since a child, from epilepsy, scoliosis, and polycystic kidney disease. Now, as a dual transplant recipient, having endured 30 surgeries with more than 60 inches of scars, she uses her firsthand experience to help educate and inspire others. Next, we have Kelli Collins. Kelli is the Director of Patient Engagement at the National Kidney Foundation, which advocated and invested in research, patient programs, professional education, public awareness, and legislative and regulatory reform for more than 70 years. Finally, we have Paul Gionfriddo. Paul is the president and CEO of Mental Health America, a community-based nonprofit working to improve the mental health of all Americans. Welcome, our speakers. Thank you for being here today. Valen, let's start with you. You've been a tireless advocate for so many years. Can you share a bit about your personal journey and share your thoughts and your concerns about your own health during the pandemic?
Thank you for having me today. My health journey started when I had my first grand mal seizure when I was 5 years old. And when I was in 8th grade, I had severe scoliosis and needed surgery where I had 2 Harrington rods placed in my spine to correct the severe S-curve. When I was 10 years old, I was diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease, which is one of the most common life-threatening genetic diseases. I inherited it from my mother's side of the family, and this disease has had a devastating impact on my family, with the oldest to live is my mom right now at 64, and everyone else passed away before the age of 53. I wound up being the first in the family to endure such severe side effects from the disease and the first to receive a transplant. So with my polycystic kidney disease journey, I wound up being in and out of the hospital through middle school and high school with cyst bleeds. I spent about a year in the hospital when I was 18, where both kidneys were removed. I was on dialysis. and received, fortunately, a kidney transplant when I was 19, which was almost 18 years ago, and that kidney is still working great today. I really did well for about 10 years after my kidney transplant, and then several years ago, I wound up getting really sick again. I had repeat sepsis episodes, and it wound up that my polycystic kidney disease affected my liver, and I needed a life-saving liver transplant. So I'm very grateful to say that in August of 2018, I received a liver transplant. So now today, I am almost 18 years post-kidney transplant, almost 2 years post-liver transplant, and I am the healthiest I have been in years and feeling so great. And it is all of these chronic health issues that led to my passion of being a patient advocate. I really strive to use my firsthand experiences to help educate and inspire others. And I'm really hoping to be the role model that I wish I had when I was younger. I want to showcase that people that are post-kidney transplant, living with chronic illnesses, can live a joyful, fulfilling, and productive life. And right before COVID-19 started, I really felt like the healthiest, happiest, and best version of myself that I had been in years. I just started to get back to a normal life, was traveling and doing speaking engagements, and all of a sudden this happened and things changed in a split second, which I'm very used to in my journey. And it's been really challenging and scary to think of the good health that I've been gifted now twice could be taken from me. It's really scary having a suppressed immune system. The concerns for me vary on, if I get this, how my body is going to respond to it. And with the statistics that I'm hearing of 28 to 30% of transplant recipients not surviving COVID, it's really scary, of course. So for me, I'm living a really isolated life right now. Since March 17th, I've only gone out once a month for labs, and I'm really trying to do all I can to protect my restored health. I think the big concern for me right now is evaluating risk moving forward. There's, of course, no manual for life, and there's definitely no manual for this right now. And for me, it's really hard to judge what's okay and what's not okay, and second guessing sort of every decision I'm making. And I think going forward, it's just going to be really hard for me to make those slow, I guess, decisions on how to reacclimate myself and get back into society again with all of this.
Thanks, Valen. I think your story is such a huge inspiration to so many of those out there. Kelli, the National Kidney Foundation helps to serve so many patients similar to Valen. And we know that the foundation focuses on the whole patient through the lens of kidney health. Since many of those patients are undergoing dialysis or maybe immune compromised, what are some of the major concerns about treatment and staying well under COVID? How might that impact a person's mental health?
It's a great question. I think, Valen, you spoke to a lot of it so well, and thank you so much for sharing your story. It is incredible, and I think very inspiring for others to hear, and will resonate a lot with some of the challenges that you're facing now in this COVID era, which is, unprecedented for all of us as we try to navigate this new world and whatever this new normal looks like as we move forward. Certainly for dialysis and transplant patients, I think the biggest concern has been about how to get the care they need, despite the fact that we're all under, social distancing and quarantine in certain places. For dialysis patients, their treatment is their lifeline. They need it to survive. And so being told to stay at home and also knowing they have to go out 3 times a week to their dialysis clinic to get treatment, it was certainly daunting for people at first. And we did receive a lot of calls from people concerned about whether or not they should go. And even with transplant, do I really need to go get these labs drawn now? Can I wait a month? And now that we've seen COVID has kind of been lasting longer than maybe people expected, you can't put it off a month or 2. It might be a year that we're still looking at this. So we really worked with patients to talk about, where they need to place their priorities, certainly always putting their health first, talking with their doctors, utilizing the telehealth services that are becoming more and more available, And if there are ways that, for transplant patients trying to do all the labs together instead of going twice a month, you talking with their doctors to do that safely and not doing any of that on their own. And dialysis facilities have been taking a wealth of caution, lots of different ways that they're working to ensure that patients are staying safe, isolating any potential COVID or people who have been diagnosed with COVID, so that everybody can feel safe and continue to get their treatment and be well.
Thanks, Kelli. Paul, we've heard from so many patients, and you've obviously heard the comments that Valen and Kelli have shared. You represent and lead a mental health and advocacy organization. From your point of view, what's changing because of COVID? Are people coming to you with different needs or with different requests for support? What are some of the new reasons people are looking to MHA for help?
Well, let me say first that I really appreciate being part of a panel like this, because for really a long time, I think people saw the mental health issues that we all have as separate and distinct from any other kinds of chronic conditions or diseases that people might have. And so we often treated those mental health conditions differently and often really ignored them when they were coming hand in hand with other chronic diseases or chronic conditions. What we've seen basically since the start of the pandemic has been that the worry level for 100% of the population has gone up. So I often tell people it's natural to feel worried about this, uncertain about the future, uncertain about your own future and the futures of the people that you love. There's so much out of our control, and it really makes it challenging for people to live with all of that worry. But for a certain subset of people, what's happened is the worry has been transforming. It's transformed to anxiety. It's transformed to depression. Interestingly, we're also seeing increases in other mental health conditions that we wouldn't normally associate with a pandemic and with worry, such as psychosis. But the reality is that these mental health conditions, while they are dramatically increasing, are not increasing across the population as a whole. People in my age group who were considered to be most at risk for COVID-19 are actually the people who seem to be least affected by the mental health impacts of this. The people who are most greatly affected by the mental health impacts are two populations. The first is people who have had other chronic conditions and are now dealing with those issues that are related to that, and also young people. The people we all thought felt that they were so healthy that they wouldn't be affected by this. What we're seeing in the people who come to Mental Health America, the people who take our online screening tools, make use of those and seek resources from us, we're seeing young people certainly more affected, more impacted by all of what's been going on here than we'd ever seen before. And so I think we have to understand that what COVID-19 has done has just brought mental health concerns out into the open for a lot of people who earlier had these concerns really beneath the surface. And I think our obligation really is to figure out what it is they're asking for from us and to figure out how it is we're going to be able to treat them holistically and recognize that just because the pandemic goes away, not only will the chronic diseases and chronic conditions that people have still be with them, but so too will the mental health concerns, the mental health conditions, the mental illnesses that they have that they may have not have had earlier.
Thanks, Paul. That was really helpful to hear. And I think it's certainly a conversation that needs to be had. So let me ask you all a question. With this pandemic impacting everyone at the same time, is there any positive aspect that may emerge from this shared experience, such as greater access to knowledge of the importance of mental health, or maybe awareness of resources, right, Paul? What do you all think?
Well, I mean, to start, I mean, people have said, we may not all be in the same boat right now, but we're all in the same ocean. And so I do think a greater understanding of the universality of both health and mental health conditions that we all experience and their interrelationship is something that we're learning from this and that we're gaining. And I'm hoping that the way we'll come out of this is in part with a recognition that we do have to do a better job of treating people holistically than we've ever done before.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think that, at the National Kidney Foundation, we're seeing and feeling similar things. Certainly, it's normalized mental health as an issue within the chronic care community. Kidney patients have always been more affected by depression and anxiety than the general population, and certainly this has brought to light that it's, also affecting the entire community now, and certainly the general public as well. And so I'm really happy to see that being normalized and people talking about mental health more and checking in with each other more, even if it is through different means than we're typically used to. I think that's been exciting to see people reconnecting over, mediums such as this, with video conferencing or online through online communities. I've heard a lot of people reconnecting with old friends and family members that maybe you don't talk to or see as much. So I think there's been some really inspiring things that people are going out of their way to become part of their community, even though they're isolated, maybe taking up hobbies and things to give back in different ways. And I think it's been really great to see, and I hope continues to build upon that as we navigate this new world.
I completely agree. And with being a patient most of my life, I've learned how much mental wellness is important and the value of it. And for me, I'm just really excited that it's being talked about more, and specifically in the communities that I'm a part of, the kidney community and transplant community. And I'm just hoping that momentum is going to continue, and that we're going to build on that, and that we're going to make this part of our conversation moving forward. Because thinking back through the different things I've gone through with pre-transplant evaluations and post-transplant care, this wasn't something that was talked about much, or there really wasn't resources. And you think when you go through these huge transitions of a diagnosis, dealing with the symptoms, dialysis, pre-transplant, post-transplant, there's a lot that you're going through, and there's a lot of support that's needed. And my hope is that it'll be a discussion of mental wellness overall, and that people will understand that what that means is physical and mental, and that this will be something that we will see now as part of the conversation and not something separate.